I remember the first time I noticed it, the way my mornings no longer carried the charge they used to, how the tasks I once tackled with a fierce hunger felt more like dull obligations. It wasn't a sudden crash, but a gradual sinking, like watching water slowly seep out of a balloon until the shape was just a memory. I caught myself reaching for my phone before even sitting up, scrolling through noise after noise, looking for, what exactly? Relief? Distraction? Pleasure? The comfort of something easy, accessible, and effortless. It felt harmless at first, almost automatic, a quick burst of dopamine in the chaos of routine. But over time, I realized something deeper was eroding inside me. This wasn't just about wasting time. It was something more visceral, an internal shift I struggled to name. A quiet surrender of my own ambition, a drifting away from that restless fire I once carried. I began to notice how desire itself, the raw hunger to improve, to conquer, to build, was slipping away, replaced by a craving for small, effortless thrills. I wasn't failing at life in any obvious way. I still showed up, still worked, still got things done. But inside, a vital pulse was missing, the steel of motivation tarnished by something subtle yet relentless. There's this invisible war playing out beneath the surface, and I felt trapped inside it without a clear enemy. The body, in ways I didn't fully understand, had adapted to constant, low-level rewards, a stream of quick hits that bypassed real effort. My days became cluttered with these tiny moments of distraction, each one small on its own but massive in their collective weight. It's like my system learned that the fastest route wasn't forward but sideways, toward comfort rather than growth. And as that lesson took root, I watched the parts of myself that valued struggle and persistence begin to fade. I started noticing how my energy thinned out. Tasks that once energized me now left me drained. Focus became elusive, scattered by the constant lure of something easier right around the corner. I'd tell myself I was just tired or stressed, but deep down I felt a kind of dull ache, the knowing that I was not living up to my own potential, that something essential was slipping through my hands. I wasn't merely distracted. I was disconnected from the force inside me that once drove me forward with fierce intent. One evening, sitting in a quiet room with the city humming faintly outside, I asked myself a question I hadn't dared ask for a long time. What am I running from? The answer wasn't simple, but it pointed to this complex web of instant gratification, a system wired to make effort feel optional. I thought about every little escape I reached for. The constant checking of screens, the endless streams of fleeting excitement, the ease of avoiding discomfort. In chasing these quick rewards, I had unknowingly trained my body and mind to devalue struggle, to treat effort as a relic instead of a necessity. And that's when the real weight hit me. This wasn't just a personal failure. It was a biological shift I hadn't recognized. My body, my brain, my very chemistry had adapted to a world where effort no longer felt urgent or essential. I wasn't at the mercy of laziness or weakness. I was contending with a rewiring of my internal rewards, a system that had taught itself to seek comfort over growth, ease over challenge. I won't pretend I have all the answers right now. What I do know is that this moment, the moment when I first saw what was happening, is where everything changed. It's where I started to see the invisible chains that had slowly bound me, and where I began to sense that breaking free would mean more than just willpower. It meant understanding these invisible mechanics and reclaiming something primal and powerful inside me. Before I could move forward, I had to face one more question. What do I reach for when the weight of effort feels too much? What little escape am I relying on to avoid the work it takes to rise again? That question, I realized, is the key to where my ambition first slipped away. It's the place where many of us find ourselves, caught between the comfort of habit and the longing for real change. I want you to sit with that question now. Write it down if you need to. Think about the moment today when you looked for a quick fix, a momentary relief. What was in your hands? What did your body crave? For me, it was often my phone, a portal to distraction, a well of shallow dopamine that never quite filled the deeper hunger inside. This path I'm on is not just about stopping those behaviors. It's about learning how to bring back the fire, the kind that doesn't flicker from fleeting pleasures but burns steady through hard-earned effort. I'm beginning to see that reclaiming ambition isn't about fighting against ourselves harshly. It's about understanding the patterns that have led us here so we can gently, yet firmly, choose a different way. And that's where this journey begins. The moment I truly grasped how something invisible had seized my inner world wasn't a grand revelation, but a quiet, unsettling encounter. I found myself in the midst of a seemingly endless afternoon, the sun waning outside the window while I sat tangled in a web of invisible inertia. My mind churned with half-formed plans for growth, yet each attempt to act felt like trudging through thick fog, heavy, cumbersome, and oddly hollow. As I wrestled with this fog, a voice inside whispered that my body was no longer wired for ambition, but had settled into a silent agreement with ease. Lost within this internal stalemate, I realized the outward hustle I maintained was a fragile mask, an echo of prior momentum barely holding against creeping surrender. In the weeks that followed, I began uncovering the subtle ways our biology bends toward comfort at the price of vitality. The brain's reward system, when flooded with too many trivial thrills, recalibrates to expect gratification without input. It's as if the gears of effort outside our awareness become unlubricated, creaking with resistance when genuine challenge appears. I noticed in myself a reaction much like a muscle that's grown weak by disuse. The instinct to shy away from difficulty even before trying. It was revealing how rapidly my body dismissed persistence as an outdated code, favoring instead the path offering immediate returns, regardless of its true value. One afternoon, exhausted by this growing lethargy, I spoke aloud to my own reflection. Why do I shrink when the moment demands strength? The question hit a nerve, stirring memories of better days when pushing boundaries felt thrilling instead of taxing. My eyes locked with mine in the mirror, searching for the spark that once burned brighter. That spark seemed dimmed, submerged beneath layers of complacency. Yet knowing it lingered there offered a fragile thread of hope. The challenge was clear, to rekindle recognition that life's sweetness derives not from avoidance but from endurance. Yet, reinvigorating that dormant flame required more than willpower. It demanded insight into the silent erosion that had unfolded under my skin. Beyond internal shifts, I soon recognized how external surroundings deepen this influence. The web of convenience woven by modernity presents seductions disguised as necessities. Fast entertainment, immediate online feedback, effortless consumption, all conspire to chip away at resilience. I witnessed friends around me, their energy waning for reasons they couldn't quite name, succumbing to repetitive cycles of distraction that numbed ambition. It felt like observing a town slowly dimming its streetlights, not through a sudden blackout but a gradual dimming, until the streets no longer invited exploration or progress. In an attempt to break free, I embarked on deliberately introducing resistance into my daily rhythm. Instead of scrolling mindlessly, I gave myself tasks that demanded patience and focus. Learning a new technique on guitar, committing to waking early despite fatigue, setting aside time to write without interruption. Each act was a small battle, at times frustrating, often uncomfortable. However, over days stretching into weeks, something shifted beneath the surface. My body responded, subtly at first, with a creeping sense of vitality returning to limbs and mind. I began feeling the stirrings of hunger not for easy pleasure but for authentic achievement. One evening, as dusk settled in, I sat down with a trusted friend and shared what I'd observed in myself. It's like my brain had traded ambition for apathy, I admitted. But now I'm relearning what it means to want something that matters. He nodded knowingly and shared how he, too, had succumbed to quick fixes, until dedicating time to physical training reawakened his drive. Hearing his story felt like adding fuel to a fire, a reminder that reclaiming urgency is less an isolated struggle than a universal human voyage. This practice of embracing resistance wasn't about imposing punishment but rediscovering a rhythm where effort becomes meaningful again. I noticed how moments of discomfort transformed from threats into signposts showing areas ripe for growth. When my muscles ached after a workout or when concentration wavered during focused work, these sensations became evidence of active transformation rather than failure. Gradually, the instinct to run from challenge yielded to curiosity. Curiosity about the depth of strength I might still unlock within myself. Now, consider how this applies when you face a daunting task that seems too demanding to tackle. Perhaps it's starting a new project, mastering a skill, or confronting personal fears. Notice if your impulse is to avoid, to seek distraction, or to chase the immediate thrill of relief. Understanding that automatic retreat isn't a weakness but a learned response can soften self-judgment and open a new path to choose persistence instead. Each time we resist the pull toward ease, we feed an internal reservoir of resilience, gradually transforming the body's expectations and reigniting a core drive. Reflecting back, I can see that my journey wasn't simply about eliminating distractions but fundamentally about reshaping how my system values effort against reward. There's a primal satisfaction that arises when progress is earned, neither rushed nor shallow. It's the satisfaction of a seed breaking through tough soil or the slow crescendo of a symphony emerging after patient rehearsal. These experiences reveal a deeper wiring within us, a call toward growth that transcends momentary indulgence. The reclamation of that call requires patience, persistence, and the capacity to inhabit discomfort without flinching. Each step forward, no matter how small, delivers a quiet affirmation that the internal landscape can be rewired. I've seen how this rewiring breathes life back into parts of myself I thought had gone dormant, awakening not only ambition but an authentic sense of aliveness. As we learn to embrace what stretches us, we reclaim a fundamental aspect of human nature, the relentless, unyielding drive toward becoming something greater. I found myself wandering through a familiar but unsettling terrain, not outside, but within. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window pane, I sat in my dimly lit room and noticed a peculiar restlessness swelling inside. It wasn't frustration or anxiety, but a gnawing sense of disconnection, like standing in a crowd and feeling utterly invisible to myself. Suddenly, my usual escapes, the intermittently scrolling feeds, the bursts of mindless amusement, no longer offered sanctuary. Instead, they revealed themselves as hollow echoes, fleeting shadows that faded the second I sought substance beyond the surface. That night, I realized my inner world was craving a more profound kind of satisfaction, one that required more than passive consumption or momentary distraction. I remembered a conversation with an old mentor who once spoke about inner alchemy, the transformative process of converting raw, uncomfortable experiences into enduring strength. He described it as a forge, where heat and pressure reshape metals into something resilient and enduring. The metaphor stayed with me because it captured precisely what I sensed was missing. My internal landscape wasn't just dulled by overexposure to ease. It had become a place resistant to fire, reluctant to undergo the necessary trials that cultivate tenacity. This resistance wasn't mere stubbornness but a biological shield, engineered by habitual comfort to protect a fragile sense of equilibrium at the cost of growth. To break free, I had to probe beyond simple surface changes, beyond swapping distractions for disciplines. One afternoon, while jogging through a park heavy with autumn's chill, I confronted a surprising truth. My body's very chemistry had adapted to expect immediate feedback and reward. This reality transformed each step I took, morphing what should have been a rejuvenating run into a draining chore, as if my muscles had no interest in building endurance because they were trained to anticipate surrender. It dawned on me that abandoning comfort wasn't simply about willpower but about reconditioning an entire system accustomed to shortcuts. The process felt akin to teaching an ancient instrument new melodies. It required patience, intentionality, and repetitive practice until unfamiliar tunes felt natural. Days later, I tested this theory by deliberately setting small, intentional delays on my impulses, postponing the urge to check my phone or delaying the immediate gratification of likes online. Each deferral felt like stepping into an unfamiliar current, a push against a stream of consolation I had long taken for granted. On one particular evening, I found myself reaching for a video game controller only to pull back and close the console. My fingers twitched as if they remembered old patterns deeply etched, yet I resisted. Instead, I chose to write for 30 minutes, drafting a letter I'd been procrastinating on. The clarity that emerged from exchanging the hollow victory of short distraction for sustained focus felt unexpectedly invigorating, like breathing crisp air after suffocating in a closed room. A friend noticed these shifts and voiced curiosity about what sparked such subtle but persistent change. I admitted it was less about external motivation and more about tuning into a delayed feedback loop inside me, valuing growth that keen rushes but unfolds like a slow-burning torch. He shared how, after years of leaning on readily available comforts, he'd started practicing cold exposure therapy, plunging into ice baths to shock his system awake. He described the experience as rediscovering a primal alertness, a visceral reminder that discomfort wasn't something to avoid, but a vital language of life, signaling transformation. Hearing his story illuminated how physical practices could shape not only body but also mindset and spirit. Inspired by this, I experimented further with disciplines that disrupted my habituated ease. Early mornings turned into rituals of silence, where I sat with nothing but my breath, resisting the pull toward instant stimulation. In that quiet, I glimpsed a part of myself rarely accessed, a deep well of patience and curiosity that surfaced only when external noise receded. The practice wasn't always pleasant. Mornings were rough, thoughts jumbled and unsettled. Yet steadily, this deliberate scarcity of distraction opened pathways for authentic presence, allowing me to face discomfort directly rather than dissolve into fleeting pleasure. One evening, while reflecting on these shifts, I realized how these seemingly minor choices accumulated into a larger narrative of reclaiming agency. Instead of being passive recipients of whatever came easiest, I was asserting authorship over my internal experience. This shift wasn't dramatic but gradual, like dawn unfurling slowly, casting light where shadows once lingered. I felt a renewed capacity to set intentions, confront challenges, and resist the siren call of effortless escapes. A quiet renaissance took hold, knitting together fragments of lost willpower into a tapestry of intentional living. Now, consider your own landscape of resistance. What hidden routines or subtle cravings keep pulling you toward short-lived relief instead of deeper fulfillment? Imagine what could unfold if you chose to face those moments differently. If you introduced small disruptions that, at first uncomfortable, gradually tuned your system back to a rhythm where effort yields authentic reward. This isn't about denying joy but reorienting your compass toward pleasures born from meaningful challenge. In stepping into this process, you discover an unspoken dialogue where discomfort sows the seeds of vitality, resilience, and renewed desire. I know the path isn't linear. Setbacks will come, and old habits will beckon like familiar shadows. Yet each act of conscious choice reclaims a measure of power surrendered long ago. Through deliberate encounters with discomfort, we coax our bodies and minds to relearn the language of endurance, igniting a vitality that no passing pleasure can replicate. This kindling of true fire reveals itself not in blazes of fleeting euphoria, but in enduring embers that warm, guide, and illuminate the way forward. The rhythm of my days began to shift in subtle yet profound ways as I confronted an unfamiliar reality. My cravings for certain quick gratifications were not merely habits but messages from deeper layers of my psyche demanding attention. It was through a chance encounter with a rugged woodsman I met while hiking that I first glimpsed a different model of living, one governed not by incessant stimulation but by patient endurance and respect for natural cycles. He spoke with a calm certainty about the importance of embracing hardship as a crucible for growth, recounting how the chill of early mornings and the strain of heavy labor forged an unshakable clarity within him. His words echoed an ancient wisdom that those fleeting satisfactions we chase so eagerly risk eclipsing when we sidestep the necessary trials life offers. His story stayed with me as I trudged back down the trail, muscles sore and mind loud with reflection. I realized that my resistance to sustained challenge was, in many ways, a disconnect from natural laws anchored in adaptation to external hardship rather than internal comfort. Unlike the woodsman, who welcomed cold winds and rugged terrain as allies rather than enemies, I had cocooned myself within insulated routines, cushioned by endless technological diversions and immediate entertainment. This contrast brought to light how modern living, with its relentless accessibility, had effectively rewired my neural pathways to avoid tension, thereby dulling my internal compass for ambition and persistence. Driven by this insight, I began to seek opportunities that required deliberate discomfort, acts that demanded more than a quick fix for my attention. For instance, I took up rock climbing, a challenge that tested my coordination, patience, and nerve in entirely new ways. On the first climb, Gripping cold, rough granite with trembling hands, I confronted how easy it is to give in to the mind's temptation to quit. The stubborn urge to quit wasn't merely a nuisance. It was a visceral signal that my body had grown used to surrendering. Yet, each time I resisted stepping down, pressing onward in spite of fatigue, I noticed a distinct surge of raw vitality coursing through me, as if reclaiming an energy that complacency had siphoned away. That tension between wanting to give up and pushing through felt like an awakening agent, something that shattered the numbness dulled by constant ease. Years before, someone might have told me endurance was a virtue, but it always felt abstract, a distant platitude with little bearing on my frenetic lifestyle. Now, facing the unyielding cliff face, endurance transformed from theoretical wisdom into a lived, aching experience. It demanded surrender to the process, to the slow unfolding of capability beyond immediate comfort zones. The shift wasn't simply physical. It reverberated through my mind, rewiring my approach to challenges that once seemed insurmountable. Beyond physical pursuits, I uncovered how exposing myself to intellectual and emotional friction could carve similar grooves of resilience. I joined a local debate group, forcing myself to articulate arguments under pressure, tolerate criticism, and confront cognitive dissonances in real time. The sting of occasional embarrassment paralleled the physical strain of climbing, yet with every session, my tolerance for discomfort grew, alongside a renewed hunger for mastery and insight. This deliberate confrontment of mental discomfort illuminated how ambition can flourish when cultivated by meaningful struggle rather than dulled by convenience. Even more surprising was witnessing how these experiences began to ripple outwards, influencing my relationships. I noticed in conversations a newfound willingness to embrace vulnerability and candidness, a departure from my previous inclination to avoid difficult topics or emotional complexity. This expansion of emotional stamina paralleled my physical and mental growth, suggesting that embracing challenge fosters a holistic robustness, one that spans body, mind, and heart. There was a day I vividly recall. A Sunday morning thick with fog, the world outside muted and still. I was midway through a demanding climb when my grip faltered, sending a sharp tremor through my forearms. An instinctive fear rose to retreat, whispering seductive promises of safety in inertia. Instead of yielding, I closed my eyes briefly, inhaled the damp air, and allowed the discomfort to anchor me. In that moment, I discovered a paradox. Discomfort, far from being an enemy, could be a steadfast ally guiding me deeper into presence and power. The climb resumed with renewed focus, my breath steady, my resolve crystallized. I encourage you now to reflect on moments when you've faced resistance, not just physical but emotional or intellectual, and how you responded. Did you lean into the unease, allowing it to shape and sharpen your resolve? Or did you turn away toward easier paths, momentary relief carved out from fleeting pleasures? Imagine if those difficult junctures were portals rather than obstacles, gateways opening to untapped reservoirs of strength locked behind the thin veneer of discomfort. Your body, mind, and spirit can be retrained to recognize these signals not as threats, but as invitations to ascend. This process is neither swift nor simple. It resembles a complex weaving of small, deliberate actions threading together to build a resilient fabric of being. I understand because every step forward has demanded a choice to confront unease, sometimes trembling before unknown outcomes, other times driven by sheer stubbornness to break patterns ingrained for years. Along the way, I've learned that these deliberate acts of resistance are the very moments where dormant ambition reignites, casting off the shackles of placation and stirring an inner fire with raw, undeniable intensity. So now, consider what this resistance looks like in your own life, not a vague ideal but a concrete strategy. Where can you invite intentional discomfort that challenges your limits? How might embracing discomfort become a radical form of self-care, nurturing the truest, most potent version of yourself waiting to emerge beyond the lure of shortcuts and trivial rewards? This is the terrain where vigor and purpose reside, quiet, demanding, and ever willing to be claimed by those bold enough to endure. As I waded deeper into this unfolding landscape within myself, there was a subtle convergence, a slow crystallization of understanding that danced just beyond words. It was as if scattered currents beneath a restless sea suddenly began to align, shaping a relentless underflow that I could neither ignore nor escape. In those quiet internal shifts, distinctions between struggle and surrender blurred into a hazy twilight where the true nature of transformation awaited. It was no longer about opposition or resistance in a simplistic sense, but about entering into a rhythm that pulses beneath the surface of deliberate change. A rhythm I had long ceased to hear amidst the clamor of immediate gratification. I recall the eerie stillness that often followed my brief moments of clarity, when the usual noise paused and an almost sacred space emerged. In that expanse, a tension took shape, not a ceasefire between desire and discipline, but a dynamic dance that tethered them together like shadow and light. This tension neither drained nor overwhelmed. It compelled, it beckoned, ushering me toward a threshold I sensed was vital yet unseen. There was a growing impression that what I had labeled as apathy or inertia was in truth a languid state pregnant with possibility, a dormant energy biding its time until conditions ripened for ignition. This suspended state, paradoxically both heavy and pregnant with anticipation, refused to be dismissed. Conversations I held with myself in these hushed moments were quieter but no less fierce. "How long will you linger?" a voice would whisper just beyond the brink of awareness, coaxing me to look past comfort's masquerade to glimpse the restless urge beneath. It struck me that the call to awaken isn't always a thunderclap. More often, it's a faint murmur carried on the wind, easily overlooked unless we attune our senses. Yet to do so demands patience, a quiet persistence that pierces veils woven by routine and distraction. And within this patience, I began sensing a tether, an invisible cord tied taut between my present self and a deeper capacity, waiting to be summoned forth. There were nights when, instead of succumbing to familiar distractions, I allowed myself to sit in the stillness and meet that stretched silence head-on. The physical discomfort of restlessness wove itself into a canvas upon which new insights emerged with startling clarity. I felt the shadows of complacency shrink, not under assault but through steady illumination. Like dawn creeping slowly across the horizon, the erasure of fog didn't come from force but from steady light, persistent and unwavering. In those hours, I recognized that growth isn't predicated on conquest but on the willingness to engage with what is, however arduous or uninviting that may appear. Walking along quiet streets, I caught glimpses of others navigating their own hidden reckonings, each step resonating with the same intricate mixture of hesitation and determination. Our layered journeys intertwined invisibly, drawing a mosaic of humanity traced by quiet battles and hidden triumphs. This sense of shared pilgrimage underscored a profound truth, that beneath the veneer of ease and distraction lives an innate yearning, to break free from cycles that cradle us in softness but starve us of potential. It dawned on me that this yearning, though often muted under layers of fatigue or resignation, burns as persistently as the stars beyond a clouded sky. Sometimes the body betrayed itself, a restless foot tapping in rhythm, fingers twitching toward old habits long abandoned, the mind drifting toward familiar detours. Yet within these small betrayals lurked the raw material of change. Each falter held a lesson, each temptation an invitation to step back and observe rather than submit. In this interplay, I glimpsed the enduring spirit beneath fragile facades, the quiet refusal to be defined by past patterns, and the subtle emergence of a self determined to rewrite its story. At times, it felt like standing at the edge of a vast canyon, the breadth and depth both daunting and magnificent. Beyond lay uncharted terrain filled with uncertainty, but also with the promise of vital reconnection, to a deeper reservoir of resolve, to a voice that echoes steadily against the hollows within. The sheer immensity challenged me, yet it also invited awe. The paradox of fear and fascination held me poised between retreat and leap. This space of tension, neither restful nor frantic, became a crucible where the desire to return to ease fought with the call to rise beyond limitation. Reflecting on this journey so far leads me to recognize that beneath surface resistance simmers an unspoken longing, a drive to reattune, to rediscover a pulse that transcends fleeting pleasures. It seems that beneath the quiet withdrawal lies a fertile ground, waiting not for sudden transformation but for a gentle awakening, cultivated with care, persistence, and reverence. There is a silence pregnant with possibility, a latent power threading through the spaces we often rush past. To linger there with intentionality, embracing the unknown texture of becoming, is perhaps the truest act of courage. Within this suspended stillness, I feel us poised on a knife's edge, the moment before the first ember catches flame, when all potential converges in a breath held tight. It is here, among the currents converging unseen, that new rhythms are born, inviting us to lean in with open hearts and steady resolve. The path ahead is carved not by haste or force, but by delicate, persistent attunement to the whispers beneath the noise. And as we ready ourselves to cross this threshold, a transformation gently stirs, subtle, profound, and irreversibly ours. I still carry with me a quiet image, a stretch of wilderness after rain, where every leaf glistens with renewed life and the air hums with possibility. That scene has become a mirror for how I view my own internal terrain, once parched and dormant, now gradually stirred by intentional choices that challenge old patterns. It's as if I've been walking through a fog that dulled my senses, and now each step breaks through a veil of numbness, revealing colors and textures that had been forgotten. This awakening isn't explosive or dramatic. It's more akin to dawn spreading slowly over a misty valley, soft yet unstoppable. What resonates most profoundly is how this journey has reshaped my understanding of strength, not as unyielding force or relentless achievement, but as the courage to inhabit discomfort with presence and patience. I discovered that what we often mistake for weakness is actually the body and mind signaling their need for recalibration, a plea to restore harmony by re-engaging with effort that nourishes the spirit. To listen means honoring those subtle calls, responding with mindful persistence instead of dismissal or escape. In doing so, a renewed vitality surfaces, carrying with it the essence of what it means to move forward authentically. There's an intimate conversation I now have with myself during these pauses of stillness. Instead of racing to fill every quiet space with distraction, I linger in the textures of unease and curiosity alike, allowing a gentle unraveling of resistance. Through this dialogue, I glimpse how growth is less about conquering external obstacles and more about embracing an internal evolution, a subtle recalibration of desires and habits that had narrowed over time. It's as though an internal compass, fogged by fleeting pleasures, begins to clear, pointing us steadily toward deeper fulfillment and genuine expansion. I remember sharing this realization with a close friend during a late-night conversation, his voice thick with shared understanding. "It's like rediscovering rhythm after years of silence," he said, "finding a pulse that refuses to be muted." Our exchange reinforced that this path isn't walked alone. It's part of a collective reclamation of purpose that stretches across many lives and stories. Each of us carries the potential to break cycles that have dulled ambition and to cultivate a life anchored in deliberate presence and meaningful pursuit. What strikes me now is how subtle shifts accumulate, the quiet rebellions against ingrained habits, the moments when I choose authentic engagement instead of passive indulgence. These instances don't announce themselves with fanfare, but their cumulative effect is profound. They weave together to restore an innate hunger for advancement that feels both primal and refined, igniting a steady fire that warms and guides. This fire isn't fueled by impatience but sustained by an intimate familiarity with the landscape of endurance, which reveals its gifts only through consistent tending. There is a tender kind of resilience emerging within me, not forged in brazen conquest but grown through gentle insistence. It's the resilience that welcomes challenges as invitations rather than adversaries, that reframes discomfort as a signal of growth rather than failure. I've come to see that our relationship with discomfort shapes much of our lived experience. It can be a well of exhaustion or a gateway to renewal. Choosing to linger in its presence, to meet it without aversion, has allowed my own energy to root deeper and rise stronger. As I look ahead, I am conscious of the vastness yet to explore within myself, the layers still waiting to be peeled back with care and honesty. This unfolding journey requires humility and generosity toward my own missteps and triumphs. Every act of intentional presence is a declaration that my vitality isn't hostage to easy pleasures or fleeting distractions. It is alive, responsive, and ready to reclaim the space that effort and purpose deserve in shaping a life that truly resonates. If I could leave you with one unshakable thought, it is this. Within each of us lies the capacity to rewrite the narrative written by habit and comfort. Not through force or sudden upheaval, but through a patient invitation to journey inward, to retrain the system that governs desire and reward. In the stillness between choices, in the moments when we resist the allure of trivial relief, the roots of our ambition find the nourishment to grow anew. This is the hidden work of transformation. Steady, unseen, and ultimately unstoppable. So I invite you to lean into that invitation, to feel the subtle call beyond immediate gratifications, and to discover what emerges when you reclaim the authenticity of your own drive. It's not a race, a battle, or a dramatic leap, but a deliberate dance, one sustained by presence, courage, and trust in the unfolding process. Together, step by step, we awaken not only ambition but a life rich in meaning, depth, and enduring strength.